Today in the United States Supreme Court, an important ruling on affirmative action. The justices ruled overwhelmingly that the University of Texas at Austin will have to justify using race in its admissions policies. NBC's Brian Moore has the latest from Washington.
The Supreme Court sidestepped a decision on affirmative action, but sent a clear message that race can be considered only as a last resort by public colleges and universities.
They said, look, if you are going to have affirmative action in higher education admissions, you're going to have to come up with a really good justification that the courts are going to scrutinize very carefully.
In a 7-1 ruling, the justices ordered a lower court to reconsider Abigail Fisher's argument she was unjustly denied admission to the University of Texas based on her race.
I'm grateful to the justices for moving the nation closer to a day when students' race isn't used at all in college admissions.
Schools currently using racial preferences in admissions now should end those practices and instead institute race-neutral alternatives to achieve campus diversity.
The university now has to prove it had no choice but to consider race in admissions in an effort to build a diverse student body.
We think the use of ethnicity is necessary under strict scrutiny to achieve that compelling goal.
But civil rights advocates see this case as a win, too, because the court's conservative wing didn't use this case and this time to strike down affirmative action.
What we heard from the court today was very clear. Race continues to have a place in college admissions.
And affirmative action is the best tool out there to make sure that our colleges and universities are deploying and employing all of our talent.
With the court calendar now in its final days, the justices have yet to rule on 2 same-sex marriage cases and a challenge to the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And that only increases the anticipation on those 3 cases, any one or all of which could become landmarks. Live at the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Moore, KXAN News. Robert, back to you.
Well, Brian, we're used to seeing the U.S. Supreme Court divided. Usually it's 5-4. Is there any significance to this being a 7-1 decision?
Yeah, it's really interesting what you have here. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the lone dissenter. Elena Kagan was the government's prosecutor when this was going through the whole process that got up to here, so she recused herself. But what you have is a court that is in unison on one thing. They decided not to decide. Now, what do they think the end result's going to be? The conservatives believe that this is going to be a case where the school cannot possibly prove that race is a legitimate and only way of getting a diversified student body. The liberals believe that they can pull that off fairly easily and fairly effectively. So you have both sides agreeing to send it back for another round in that lower court, fully expecting that it's going to end up right back here full circle.
We'll see how it goes. NBC's Brian Moore live in Washington. Thanks so much. Well, this is not the first time a case involving race and admissions at UT Austin has faced the U.S. Supreme Court. Back in 1996, the Hopwood case challenged race-based admissions at the UT Law School. The Supreme Court declined to review that case, letting a lower court ruling stand that said the school could not use race as a factor in determining admission. But 10 years ago, the court's ruling on a different case effectively overturned the Hopwood decision, allowing schools to use race as a factor in admitting students. In 1950, this man, Heman Sweat, sued UT because the law school at that time would not admit black students. The Supreme Court ruled in his favor, forcing the law school in Austin to integrate. Decades later, the university named part of its campus in honor of Mr. Sweat. The Travis County Courthouse is also named in his honor.